Welcome to the Low Carb Athlete Podcast, where we focus on discussing topics to help you burn fat, optimize health, and improve performance in life and sports. Transform the whole you from the inside out with the WHOLESTIC Method. Let's dive in. Here's your host, Debbie Potts.
Hey, have you started using magnesium yet? I know most of us all are running low on this important mineral, magnesium, and I love to use the supplement from BioOptimizers, and they have a few other supplements I use regularly, but for sure, magnesium is something my husband and I take each night and take it with us when we're traveling, take it even more when we're racing, and it just really helps our recovery and repair as well as our sleep. Magnesium. So, what are you going to do to improve your recovery and repair? Magnesium breakthrough is one of the most important minerals for all aspects of health. It participates in over 600 different biochemical reactions in our body. Yet over 80% of the population is deficient in magnesium, and magnesium deficiency can increase all disease risk and keep you from performing at your optimal level. If you want a great restful sleep, less anxiety, and more feelings of joy, check out BioOptimizers Magnesium Breakthrough Blend. It's the only magnesium supplement on the planet that gives you all 7 forms in the optimum dosage to help you feel calm, sleep better, and upgrade virtually every function in your body. So head to BioOptimizer's website and use our podcast code just for you, the Low Carb Athlete. So use our code Low Carb Athlete and you can save on your favorite BioOptimizer supplements as Magnesium Breakthrough.
Hello, fellow driven, ambitious, high-charging athletes. I am doing another video on how to fuel and train as the endurance athlete, low-carb athlete, but carb timing, not zero carbs if you're doing high intensity, if you're fasting too much, blah, blah, blah. I'm trying to go into this more often because it depends on the individual, how we want to fuel and train. That's why we have coaches as myself and other people that help you figure out what is the best program for you. So if you go onto the Low Carb Athlete YouTube channel, you'll be able to find a playlist, and I've been adding in these solo PowerPoint slide video recordings going into how to become a fat adapted athlete, how to fuel and how to train to be a fat adapted athlete, low carb athlete. Where do we add carbs if needed, when needed, and all sorts of information for the female athlete and the fasted exercise, big topic. So on these slides, they are all free on my website, debbiepotts.net. And you can find free resources, multiple ebooks that I've put together over the years because I learn by putting this together for you. And if you had adrenal fatigue, adrenal exhaustion at one point, and hormone imbalance you might be like me and have crappy memory. So if you have trouble remembering things, this is what I do. I put it into slides and record a video to help you, but also to help me put this information together in one spot. So just to review quickly, because all these, like every 5 slides, I could spend an hour on. So we know endurance training is primarily fat burning, because if we are burning carbs, we're going to be having to eat all the time and we will be having most likely GI stress. So what we talk about for endurance sports is why we look at being a lower carbohydrate, not zero carb, but lower than the standard athlete, and not as low as an athlete that is in nutritional ketosis doing 50 grams a day for those that don't exercise. So we are different. We are exercising frequently, sometimes more than once a day, and we are usually eating almost not enough calories and not eating enough protein and figuring that all out. So I'm trying to dive into this a little bit more for you on a Debbie Solo Cast podcast on Thursdays, and trying to do one more extra bonus one on the weekend. So Maffetone. If you go back to our podcast 10 years ago, we started calling this Fit, Fat, Fast, how to get faster by being a fat burning athlete, eating more fat to burn fat. We talked to Phil Maffetone, who created the max aerobic function heart rate, the MAF method. Now, this is where you want to train to build the aerobic engine or get metabolic testing, which I will start doing soon. If you are in San Diego area and want to come visit San Diego, I can test you this spring. So we've got our max heart rate. We're going to find where is that MAF, fat burning heart rate? Where are those zones? Where is that anaerobic threshold, where we call the metabolic crossover zone, when we have our fat fuel decreasing and our carbohydrate usage increasing. So when we do metabolic testing, as I will be doing with Pinoe here soon on the bike, on the treadmill, we can figure out what are your zones. But if you can't get access to metabolic testing, you don't want to come visit me in North San Diego, you can do the Maffetone 180 minus age formula. So then we've talked a lot about that 80-20 philosophy. I want to train for endurance events. I have a race or an event. I want to finish and not bonk, and I want to have a steady flow of energy. Well, I'm going to develop that aerobic engine and spend 80% or more, if you're just starting out, of your time building that aerobic engine. We're doing that lower intensity, zone 1 or 2, easy. I can stay here forever and get faster with at that lower heart rate. So that's going to improve our exercise endurance, protect us from metabolic syndrome, recover from high intensity doing these lower workouts, and be more resilient to oxidative stress, which speeds up our aging process. Then there's eventually, once you've created that base, we add in HIIT training. So we've talked about this with Dr. Stacy Sims, talked about this with a few different podcasts, but HIIT training, and Stacy Sims does SIT, sit training, short, high intensity interval training, which would be SHIT. So I think that's why they call it short intense training intervals, SIT. So you can call it SHIT if you want. And then there's HIIT training. That SIT training is subsection. So 1 to 3 to 4 minute high intensity, higher heart rate zones. Test and not guess with that metabolic test. Figure out what those numbers are for you. Bike, you can use watts and heart rate. When you're doing the short intensity intervals, we've spoken a few times about that, 10, 20, 30 second all out sprints. You can't really use a heart rate monitor for those because your heart rate takes longer to catch up with you. So you won't get real time heart rate. Anyways, we want to do that anaerobic HIIT training 2 times a week, 3 times a week. A lot of people are doing too much of this every day, or doing that black hole training, which is in between that zone 1, 2, and this is say zone 4 or 5, whatever chart you're looking at. But in between that anaerobic, high aerobic to anaerobic threshold training zone is kind of that black hole we've talked about. So you can look over this. Again, everything's in my ebook. Now, fasted or fed exercise. This is what we were just talking a little bit about with Aaron of Endure IQ. There are benefits of fasted exercise, but that is when you are doing that zone 1 training, low intensity, easy walk in the nature, beach walk, nice little hike, going for easy swim, spin on the bike. Fasted exercise isn't when you're going anaerobic, high heart rate, unless you want to suffer and not have great outcome. So I've been speaking about that when it is appropriate to eat something. As for myself, it's giving myself permission, because we get so strict and set in our ways, that it is looking at your purpose of your workout. If your performance will be improved if you add a little bit calories, as in your coffee with my Laird's coffee creamer that has MCT oil, mushroom adaptogens, and some, if you get the unsweetened, there's no sugar in it, but the other ones have coconut sugar in from vanilla, and I'm a little sweetener, or I like pumpkin spice. So we see the benefits here that Ben Greenfield did a while ago with a seminar with Dr. Pompa. Okay, So fasted exercise, when is it appropriate? Now, where's my screen? Now we know for exercise, if we are going longer duration than 90 minutes, it's going to be different than if we're going shorter than 90 minutes. And then if we're going higher heart rate, it's going to be different fuel plant than lower heart rate. So it depends. And you've watched the video, you can see the slide from Precision Nutrition. Now, we want to look at when is it appropriate to have something as protein before 10 to 30 grams. Now, I don't like eating. I'm not going to eat animal meat before I work out, especially it's first thing in the morning. I like to get up and go work out. So what do? Essential amino acids. Go back and find my interview a year ago with Angelo Keeley of Keon. And we talked about, say, 10 grams of protein to 15 grams is equal to 5 grams of essential amino acids. So going for essential amino acids, as with Keon, because their formulation is up to date with current research of how much of each amino acid to make it effective for protein synthesis and avoiding muscle protein breakdown. So certain workouts add those essentials. You can see every workout here on this chart is 10 to 30 grams of protein. When to add in some carbohydrates, if it's a 0 carbs to Stacy Sims recently was saying for female athletes might perform better if they have, say, I think it was 10, 20, 30 grams of carbohydrates, and men can do without and eat afterwards. So pre-workout, protein and carbs, and then there's Endure IQ and S Fuels that says having some protein and fat so you don't disrupt your fat burning. Then again, it goes to what type is your workout, what's the purpose of your workout, what the intensity is, and how long it is. So it depends again. So also, if you listen to my recent podcasts with Aaron of NGRQ, I was speaking about fasted exercise is suggested 12 to 15 hours. So to standard definition of overnight fast, that should be normal. It's not really fasting. You should not be eating 8 to 12 hours. So say 12-hour overnight from dinner to breakfast, breaking your fast, should be about 12 hours easily. The liver is empty of glycogen. There's about 300, 400 calories stored in that liver. And then we dip into burning the glycogen stores in our muscles. And that is when we start to find other fuel as fats to use in our fasted workouts. Now, this is where it gets complicated. If for me, I tend to eat my lunch, dinner around 2:00 during the workday. And then I work, and then I go sometimes to the gym and lift weights at night at 5:30 p.m. Or I am doing a walk and sauna now and some yin stretching yoga. Now, point is, if I don't eat anything after 3 p.m. and I'm working out a run or spin class intervals once a week I'm doing now at 6:15 a.m., 6:30 a.m., should I have some fuel? So this is where it gets very personalized. I'm figuring out your fuel timing and looking at your exercise duration and intensity, time of day. And then we work backwards. What time did you last eat the day before, the night before? So if you had a dinner, normal people eat at 6 p.m. and they might have some potatoes in there, or some rice or some type of starch in nature's carbs, so root vegetables. Maybe you had some berries that are in season with, I don't know what you do with that. I put it in maybe my super gut yogurt I've been making, but I tend to get my carbs from more root vegetables and not get as much fruit, especially it's wintertime. So if you are fasting overnight, what is suggested that I've heard, and I find this makes sense. If you are fasting 12 to 15 hours and you're doing your morning exercises, low heart rate, you can eat afterwards and then focus on getting that protein in. Now, if you work out, as Ben Greenfield talks about, later in the afternoon, just time it in between your lunch and your dinner so you don't have a full stomach when you go exercise, and then you wait to eat 2 hours post-workout. Now, the morning fasted exercise, what we've talked about many, many times, is an easy morning sunrise walk, going for easy swim or sauna. Because remember, if you look at your hormones in Dutch tests, you're naturally elevated blood sugar in the morning because your cortisol should be naturally higher in the morning to wake us up and get us going. So we don't necessarily need to activate our sympathetic nervous system to get us waking up when it's already high naturally. So it is in the morning, easy workout, and then ideally save your harder workout for early in the afternoon when your body's at peak state to work harder. So I think that makes sense, but sometimes we work and we don't have that choice. So that is something to think about. Fasted, you can do if it's easy. So the thing is, I've talked about many times, I often work out in the morning, first thing, and then I do master swim a few days a week at 11:45 to 1 o'clock in Solana Beach. So I have to time what I'm eating, when am I eating in between there, and looking at my workup calls, coaching calls I have, that I make sure I have food that I can digest properly, and timing a little bit more carbs, as if like I've been doing potatoes lately because I'm trying to up my potassium, which I'm supposed to get 4,700 milligrams a day, and it's super hard. So adding some russet potatoes is on my list, and I have avocado, and then get my protein in and try that. But think about women better doing a 12 to 15 hour fast. And if you are going longer than that, I would look at doing it on your non-workout day. Maybe that's your low, easy recovery, active recovery day. And you're timing it, say day 10 of your cycle to before ovulation, and then after ovulation before luteal phase gets later luteal. So men can do that. But again, it depends on your workout and your goal of your workout. If it's easy workout, or if it's a hard key workout that you're doing speed work, because that doing it on a run once a week. And if you're doing it on the bike, trying to hit higher power watts, you want to work on your nutrition before so you can hit those numbers. Okay. So that's what I just want to touch on there. Getting some protein in pre-workout and adding some MCT oils will help keep you getting some calories in, not feel like your body's stressed, but keeps you from avoiding insulin being released. So eating, again, I don't like to eat food really in the morning, but getting coffee, or if you don't do coffee, you could do mud water coffee that has mushrooms and different cinnamon, and does have a chai in it, but mud water, that's a good one too. And I think I have a discount code. Again, I always say to my clients, don't pay full price. There's always a discount code. So let me know if you need a discount for mud water, MUD/WTR. Okay. So for women, I won't go into this, as a different video, but hormone kisspeptin is what we want to be aware. Happens in women more than men, but it can happen in men too. And then fasting, I did a whole call on this too. Should we bother with fasting longer than 17 hours, as Dr. Mindy talks about all the time, if we are athletes, because we already are getting cell autophagy with strength training, getting out in the sun and getting our coffee. So you can look at some articles from Rob Wolf who talks about this. Okay. And then Dr. Dan Plews on fasted exercise helps with keeping your training low heart rate with low glycogen availability to improve your fat adaptation. But remember, training too much, the word chronic stress goes with chronic stress. Just think anything chronic is going to be a stress. Just put those two together. With low energy availability can lead to endocrine disruption. So I've been sharing, I'd like to be authentic on here and say, hey, I just have been doing my new labs and my thyroid's really low. And I'm doing a different episode on thyroid, because you don't want to just look at TSH. You don't want to look at just T3. You want to look at this full panel and your reverse T3, and T4, and T3. So there's a lot to look at there to find patterns of what type of issues do you have with thyroid. But my thyroid's low and cortisol has been lower, better than it used to be, but it's still lower end. So anything we do too much, exercise, fasting, cold plunge, anything that's hormetic stress is supposed to be acute dose, gets to be a chronic dose, is not great for your hormones. I can tell you that. I've seen it. And I see it on my clients. So the female athlete triad comes from low energy availability, and male athletes can have this as well for doing too much fasted exercise. So you want to make sure you're eating enough, because I find this is a struggle for me. I don't eat enough because I'm not hungry, and we want to make sure we're hitting that protein goals. So timing your nutrition, that's kind of what I've been trying to work with clients on Training Peaks, and try to do this on Try It Out when I get my coaching program set up on there, and look at Practice Better, where they track everything on Chronometer or NutriSense. So more on this in my book on our ebooks, and then my book, Life is Not a Race, is about my story. And more so after my second phase of probably fighting with adrenal issues is after I wrote my book, because then I started doing OMAD and exercising a lot and doing that on top of a busy day and not eating enough. So OMAD is not good for us. I'll tell you that. If you're working out like I do, one meal a day does not get your protein goals. So looking at what to eat when, so going over this one more time, 12-hour fasted window, say 7 p.m. to a.m. to p.m. is when I'm eating, 12, 15-hour maximum fast. Time your 24-hour dinner to dinner, lunch to lunch fast on a non-workout day, and females map that with your cycle. If you are lower body weight, you want to make sure you're eating enough and not fasting too much, because this is where you get more hormone dysfunction, men and women. So you want to train low in a low glycogen state by eating fat and protein instead of being fasted. So make sure doing these fasted exercises doesn't mean, well, you can still burn fat. Doesn't mean not eat any calories. And I think that's where we get in trouble as athletes. We're saying, oh, let's do fasted workout. Let's not eat anything for 5 hours and go for a bike ride. Well, it ends up backfiring if you keep doing that. Trust me, I see it on all labs from everyone I'm working with and myself. So eating some calories, as I said in the coffee, is good. Or take those Ketone essential aminos, take a shot of HVMN, ketone IQ, or do some Bubs collagen MCT oil powder in your coffee, or put some Laird's mushroom coffee creamer that has MCTs in it too. So try experimenting. And then again, there's more information on Rhonda Patrick. Dr. Rhonda Patrick has a ton of information on fasted exercise, but I think doing aminos, essential aminos before and after will help avoid that catabolism we do from exercising and making sure we're hitting those proteins later on. So you don't want to starve your muscles. So I think a lot of us are, especially people doing keto, are not eating enough protein. Okay. So I'm going to skip through all of this information and train low, race high. So we know a low carb athlete is different than nutritional ketosis. So if you are nutritional ketosis, you have health issues, metabolic chaos, you've got things going on, it's going to be different than an endurance athlete. So the lower carbs can be 100 to 200 grams a day, and putting them in strategically before a hard workout or afterwards, depending on the type of workout. I think this is where it depends. And then placing them in your dinner so you can have the carb muscle glycogen storage tank stocked up for your morning workout when you're going harder. So then you don't have to eat and spike up your glucose and cause insulin to be released. So that's what we talk about doing. Your carb timing, save them for your evening meal, is a better idea, or post-workout protein and carbs, and that will help repair and replace those storage, repair muscle and replace muscle glycogen. So that will keep you from getting out of fat burning when you are doing a fat burning workout. So why to become a fat athlete? You can find some articles on maximizing your fat adaptation process. I go into this with clients. Tips for training low. There's another article called Uphill Athlete, High Performance with Rebecca Dent. I found some information on her. And then the role of training in fat adaptation. So training in the intensity low to moderate. And that teaches the body to utilize fat as fuel. And that should be the goal as an endurance athlete. But as we're aging athletes, that's what I'm talking about. Speed work twice a week. I've been an endurance athlete for, what year is it? 1995. I started racing. So say 25 plus years, I've been doing endurance training. So as a 51-year-old now, I need to add more short, intense interval training. My run, I've been doing hill repeats once a week. And the other day I'm doing 2 minutes fast, 1 minute easy. Part of it, I'm doing some kind of physical therapy to get my running muscles to work correctly because they have not been. So I'm trying to find power in my running form and stride. So we want to be fat adapted for endurance sports. It's going to be different if you're training for a short intensity sport, right? So checking out how you're training, lower heart rate, lower carbs, carb timing, and then what type of workouts you're doing. So Volek and Finney have lots of information. Keto Gains has lots of information on carb timing. So training low and racing high, and when do we add in ketones? So great information and research from HVMN. Zach Bitters talked about this too, and having some ketones into the fuel plan, and S Fuels has actually a great fuel in their protein shake that has some ketones afterwards, and that helps recovery of your muscles, and glutamine for your gut health. So that's a great option too through S Fuels. So prebiotic foods, I think, are really important. Probiotics, safe starches. So some great recipes on S Fuels. If you go to sfuelsgolonger.com, and we have a discount code for their website, one of my favorite companies and people over there, and that's Low Carb Athlete. So they have a great article on rice, potato, and bananas, and different fuel for ultra endurance, low carb racing. So think about that if you're doing ultras. I know people I've been working with are doing adventure racing and long distance. So they don't need a lot of carbs, but just a little bit, with more focus on that fat and protein. Okay, so how do you get there? Now, this is February as you're recording this. So if you're not racing until summer, this could still be your off season if you're doing a fall race. So this is where you can do Dr. Dan Plu's fat adaptation process. So when I'm starting with the clients, kind of what I do, look at what are you eating, phase one, kind of creating baseline. I'm just looking at, okay, just give me a food log. Don't lie. Don't, make up stuff. Just totally be authentic and share. What are you eating, when you're eating, why? How do you feel? Gas, bloating, diarrhea, constipation, whatever. We're going to go into it. If you're testing your glucose, your ketones, wearing a CGM, are you testing your heart rate variability? Are you tracking and collecting data from Oura Ring or Whoop or whatever other devices? Okay, so we go into phase two. Now we're going to say, okay, can you try eating this instead of that? Let's swap. So I don't like saying keto or carnivore or paleo. I just feel like how you should eat is individualized, but we all should agree it's nutrient dense whole foods. If it's vegetarian, vegan, paleo, carnivore, whatever, the general trend there, a theme is real food. So avoiding the vegetable oils, the toxic inflammatory oils, avoiding refined sugars and flours and packaged foods. So really just finding what we can eat and how we can transition to choosing whole foods. So we're taking baby steps here because it's not a diet. This is a lifestyle. I tell people we're not doing this 30-day program and we're just going to go back to eating garbage after that. So we just want to learn how to eat real food and feel good when we're eating these foods and realize how good they taste, and get your taste receptors and not craving sweet, but you're tasting savory and getting some good meal ideas out of there too. And then we move into phase three. This is where you go into cold keto for about 3 weeks. And you don't stay here forever. This is for athletes, okay? So you go 3 weeks, and it's 2 weeks at a time for females. So they're going to be different if you're premenopausal, where you're going 50 grams of carbs, and then we'll figure out fat and protein from there. So you're doing non-starchy veg, nuts and seeds, healthy fats, animal proteins. The carbs get lower. This is where you're getting that metabolic switch. And so then females go days 7 to 14. So you're going to find this cold keto, 2 different cycles. Okay. So going into phase one, I talk about this a little bit more, and then phase two. And then we start to make those changes and testing your glucose, heart rate variability, see how you go. Because if your HRV, I like this note here. HRV, if it goes low, so lower is not better, higher is better, HRV. You could be going too low of carb too quickly. So think HRV drops because of a stressor. So if you're making too fast of changes, this is why we take these baby steps, and that Dr. Dan Plu's created this 4-phase program. So you want to make sure you're not going too quickly, and we want to track because we want to test and not guess and know, okay, how am I personalizing this process and how to make it work best for me? So if you're going too low of carbs too fast, or you're doing high training loads, or you're eating foods that are reactive, where we test like Vibrant Wellness Zoomers, we want to track what's going on with the HRV and the heart rate and your blood sugar. So if your glucose changes, your carbs, you're too low too fast again, your ketones aren't being made as much yet when you're early on. So that can alert stress. And stress means cortisol, and cortisol means blood sugar. So you'll see that increase in blood sugar. So again, previous episodes, I talked about this domino effect. Stress raises cortisol, chronic stress, chronic cortisol raised, increases blood sugar, and that increases insulin. And then we become this chronically in this pattern, and then insulin resistant happens. It could be nothing to do with your eating. It's from chronic stress. And this is what happened to me. So I gained 30 pounds in a few months, had nothing to do with my exercise or my nutrition. So keep that in mind. Chronic stress impacts the whole you. So phase 2, and then we went to phase 3 was a cold keto, where we want to track and really be careful and figure out your nutrition, real food. And testing ketones, 0.5 on a Keto Mojo, goal to go about 50 grams a day. And those are coming from non-starchy vegetables, maybe some berries. And then we find that sweet spot. And the sweet spot's when we come up to where we stay around when we're training, 100 to 200 grams. Dan Plew says average 130, but it depends on the person. I know Ben Greenfield's talked about 200 or more for some people. They're really active and doing a lot of more intense training. They're doing more anaerobic, like kettlebell workouts and more sprint training. Their carb intake can be different. And then women want to look at their late luteal phase will be different too, and their ovulation. So test and not guess. So Dr. Dan Plew's example, how do you get a cold keto day? It sounds like to me, when you look at this, so much food. So obviously I struggle with eating enough because I'm not hungry, but morning fat coffee, MCT oil and collagen. I use Bub sometimes. Bub MCT and collagen is great, or Laird's. Now, post-workout, so then he kept fat burning in his workout. He didn't have any carbs to spike up his glucose to alert insulin to be released. Then he saved his meal to after workout and would have protein and fat and some vegetables. So his eggs and sardines are his fats and proteins, and coconut oil. He cooked his eggs, sardines in there, or maybe just the eggs. And the broccoli is a source of carbohydrate. And then another cup of coffee with that, maybe some heavy cream. And then got hungry, had an S Fuels bar, which is a good balance of protein and fat with some low glycemic carbohydrates. And then he timed that if you're working out on a 2-a-day workout. And then having dinner. Well, this is where I think it's funny because I would never eat this much, but this is Dan's working out way more intensely. Say salmon, olive oil, avocado, and asparagus is another meal. And then steak and a simple salad was his evening meal with dark chocolate. Sounds like a ton of food, right? So you're not dieting when you're doing the cold keto phase or just doing this lower carb. You're eating a ton of food depending on your activity level. And that's 50 grams of carbs a day. So I think it's easy not to get enough when you get into this. Okay, so cold keto phase tips and tricks are on there, suggesting about testing again. Glucose may increase. The higher cortisol increases as you start to get more ketones released. So your glucose may be higher because of stress as your body adjusts. So doing higher intensity workouts during cold keto phase will help the body in that adaptation phase. So it's normal to have lower performance output because you don't have as much energy, but it helps kind of use up the energy from the glycogen stores. And then sleep is crucial, but when you're going through this phase, it might be harder. So timing your carbs in that evening meal, say 10 grams to help with sleep, but also getting those electrolytes. So the sodium loss from not getting the processed foods anymore. We're not eating the high carb diet. So that's why we usually hear about that keto flu, and we need to add in some salt, potassium, magnesium, which is why we love Element. And you can get a free pack if you use our code Low Carb Athlete, or there's Redmond's Real Salt and Real Light. I always get them unsweetened because I don't like stevia, and stevia is in everything. So I'm anti-stevia for most people because we're getting too much of it and it craves sweet. So we want to get rid of that sweet taste. You got to get rid of the sweeteners. Okay. Phase 4, finding your sweet spot. This is where we get out of the cold keto phase and we're adding in what works for you. This is where we really individualize it. 100 to 130 grams, 200 grams. Where do you feel good? What works best for you? So adjusting those carbs per day is going to be based on your workout too. So I look at, okay, what's your workout this week? I didn't do as much today. Yesterday I did a hard run and a hard swim. So I added a little bit more carbs, which came from, I think I had coleslaw with the meal. And then I had those potatoes, sliced potatoes. Neil's been making really yummy, sliced really thinly, like pickle slices, and then cooked in bacon fat. Yummy. So you want to test everything as you're going through this. Okay. So that's what we look at when we're doing that fat adaptation. What are some carbs to add in? That's often a question because we get fearful. So real food, nutrient dense real food. Do we forget what that is? So adjusting your carb intake based on your heart rate variability, based on your performance, based on your glucose. If your high intensity performance is decreasing, this is where you can add in a little more carbs. So test and not guess by looking at your workout numbers, looking at how you feel, looking at what on it's Tim Noakes food list. It's red foods, orange foods, and then there's green foods. So looking at more orange foods, maybe it's more potato. It's more of those root vegetables, beetroot, onions, carrots. I've been doing raw carrots. They're really good. The colored ones from the dirt ground. They're just like, look like they just got dug out of the dirt when we order them. So looking at that, beetroots. I've been trying to do a little more beets and goat cheese. Very good. Okay. So looking at when to add in those carbs, that strategic carb timing. So after you work out, you're in that workout, you're trying some Vespa is one thing. Dr. Peter Defty, optimal fat metabolism, and involved with Vespa. That's a great solution. S Fuels has their bar. It has their S Fuels train you can use. And then when you put in these carbs in your evening meal to fuel for your workout in the morning and then having them afterwards. In that meal, safe starches, sweet potatoes, yams, taro root, cassava, yucca, tapioca, plantains, potatoes, but those are nightshades. So if you are reactive to nightshades, you may want to not have those, but those are some good ideas. I find it interesting, white rice versus brown rice. How many of us thought brown rice was healthier because it's brown, it looks natural? Well, brown rice contains the bran, the hull, and the husk, which is where the anti-nutrients are. So the Japanese knew what they're doing when they're having white rice all the time, and we're thinking we're healthy. We have the brown rice. So choose white rice, cooked and cooled, to make it a safe starch. So a lot of plants, you'll hear about the lectins, phytates, oxalates, FODMAPs, nightshades, so many vegetables, which is why a lot of people do a gut healing program using carnivore, because all these plant foods can have anti-nutrients. Now, you can look at hormesis, acute stress, having a plant toxin, but if you just do that once a week and you properly prepare it, soak and rinse it, sprout it, that might be better for you if you want to have some, but just don't have it every day. Like I have someone that was having kale 2 meals a day, and I just think, okay, let's look at that swap and what else we can do, and just maybe do that once a week. So safe starches contain minimal to no anti-nutrients, especially compared to a variety of plants such as grain, nuts, seeds, legumes, and nightshades. So that's what safe starches are. So way back when, Paul Jamine's Perfect Health Diet had that in. So can't really see this infographic, but 30 to 50 grams of carbs. What does that look like? So going with more of the root vegetables is my choice. And then looking at green beans. I like to look at cauliflower, broccoli, foods that are going to help my liver, phase 1 and phase 2 detox. And then look at foods that will help be a prebiotic food for my microbiome. So nature's carbs, looking at these different foods. Total carbs is beets, carrots, onions. I don't know, peppers make me burp. Brussels sprouts I love with bacon, but they seem to make me burp it up afterwards. So you got to kind of test and how you feel or get tested, but you can also, if you kind of keep a food log, see how food makes you feel, you might realize, oh, I can't do corn. I can't do cucumber, but broccoli, maybe you can do broccoli. So I think that's a good list to look at. So testing a 7-day carb tolerance test, as Rob Wolf talks about in his book, Wired to Eat, that will see what foods work for you, 50 grams of carbs, and test with a glucose meter. 2 hours after you eat it, take your glucose again. And then there's information on carb cycling, doing a refeed, carbs more at nighttime, matching your fueling with your training, or maybe you keep low carb all week long. Then you have one day that you're kind of what's called keto flex. Benazati talks about that you do one day of moderate to high carbs. Doesn't mean pig out. It just means you have maybe 200 grams of carbs instead of 100 grams. So you're adding a little bit more in. Just like what Dr. Mindy Pelz talks about on late luteal phase for women, say day 20, 28 of your cycle, that's when you're having more progesterone promoting foods. Okay. So we're being nutritional ketosis, and then you have carb metabolism improves. So you want to have fat and carb metabolism functioning at optimal levels. So we're not stuck in just not being able to digest carbs. So I think you look at Jay Feldman's information, you want to look at that. Okay. So endurance training, 80-20, mapping out your workouts using TriDot, using Training Peaks, and your IQ program gives you some good information. But adding in your strength training in there, your zone 1 training, kind of that zone 2, zone 3, below the LT, lactic threshold. And then specific high intensity workouts in 2 and 3 stimulate high intensity adaptations. That's 20% of the time. And then you want to make sure you're having that right program. And that's why I'm doing the PNOE testing, hopefully, so I can help figure out what are those numbers for you. Let's test. And then I want to start that testing and then look at, okay, what does your fuel look like beforehand? What if we add some MCT oil or have a S fuels bar? What is that fat oxidation rate when you do have some fuel? So looking at this information. So that is it for today. We'll stop there, training the female athlete. For next time, let me know your questions.
Thanks for listening to the Low Carb Athlete Podcast. If you have any questions, feedback, or topic suggestions, let us know on Facebook or at debbiepotts.net. You can help us to continue to grow by leaving a review on iTunes. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.